Here's the title of our sermon for today. Who is the pastor of our church? Now you might think that's a stupid question. That's a simple question. Brad is the pastor of our church. Well, the answer is more complicated than what you think. I actually have 4 answers to this question. And we want to think about it because we want our church to be built on God's Word, which is the reason for this subtitle, Shepherding the Flock of God According to the Bible. The flock means the sheep. Shepherding the sheep according to the Bible. Now, our church is a young church. We've only been functioning for 4 years. And I have a particular ministry in my role as a pastor. I'm what they call a church planter. That is, someone who starts churches. So by God's grace, over the last 40 years, we've started 5 different churches, not all alone, but with the help of other people around us. And so this is a new church by some standards, because many churches are very old, right? And so a new church is something like a baby human. First we're a baby, then we're a middle-aged child, and then a teenager, and then an adult. And how long does it take to grow an adult? Like 20 years, something like that? So it takes time also for a church to become fully mature and autonomous. But so in the last week, this week, and in a couple of more weeks, we'll be talking about how a local church is governed, church government. And today I'll be talking about who a pastor is and what a pastor does a little bit. And my answers are going to surprise you. Okay, be prepared to be surprised by the answers. Who is the pastor of our church? First answer. Jesus is the pastor of our church. That's what we've been singing about this morning, right? Shepherd of my soul. Did you know that pastor and shepherd are the same word originally in the Old French? We said pâtre, and we have the word pasture in English. It has to do with shepherding sheep, and the pastor is a shepherd, actually. So Jesus is the pastor of our church. Let's look at a few verses from the Bible. Jesus said in John chapter 1, I am the good shepherd. We could also translate this, I am the good pastor. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. Here's what the Apostle Paul says about Jesus and his role in the church. God placed all things under his feet, under Jesus' feet, and he appointed him to be the head over everything for the church, which is his body. So we have changed images here. I'm not talking about shepherd and sheep, but the head and the body. So Jesus is the head of our church, and we are the body of Christ. Here's another verse from the Bible. We read it this morning. The Apostle Peter, he was writing to other pastors, and he said this, when the chief shepherd, Jesus, appears, you will receive the crown of glory that will never fade away. When Jesus comes back, he will give a reward to those who have been serving his church as under-shepherds, I will call them. So, if Jesus is the pastor of our church, Jesus is alive. Okay, Jesus is not just a little ceramic figure on a wall. He is alive. He is here today. He is loving you, caring for your soul, wanting to heal things that have been broken in our lives, wanting to counsel us, wanting to lead us in the right paths. And so we should all be looking to Jesus as the chief shepherd. And it has some implications for me as a pastor and for our church leaders. If Jesus is the pastor of the church, well then no pastor should consider himself as the boss of the church. Okay? I am not the boss of the church. I can't do whatever I want with the church. I can't say, you do this, you do that. No, I have a boss. Okay? Jesus is the chief shepherd. And if he is the chief shepherd, then church leaders and all of us should know Jesus, know his teachings, and try to apply them and seek his guidance and help. So church leaders, church shepherds are people who should be people of prayer, talking to Jesus about the church, asking Jesus for guidance, for help, for strength, studying his word to know what Jesus' policy is for the church. And if Jesus is the pastor of this church, then pastors, shepherds should remember that one day we will have to give an account to Jesus. When Jesus comes back, as Peter was saying, he will ask us, so what did you do with my sheep? Imagine this illustration. Let's say you are a rancher, okay, and you own sheep. Let's say you have a big ranch. You have 3,000 sheep. I know somebody in Canada who has 5,000 sheep. You've got lots of sheep, okay, and you can't look after all of those sheep because you have lots of things to do, so you hire a shepherd to look after the sheep. And then one day you drive out into the field to see how your sheep are doing, and you see the sheep are scattered, they're everywhere, they're lost. You see that they're hungry, they're all skinny because they haven't been led to green pastures. They're thirsty, they're sick, and there you see the pastor laying on the ground, soaking up the sun. What do? You fire the pastor, right? The shepherd, and you say, you're not looking after the sheep. So the sheep don't belong to me or any church leader. They belong to Jesus. And one day he will ask us as leaders, what have you done with our sheep, with my sheep? I have to report to him. And so if Jesus is the chief shepherd, he is also the model shepherd. And church leaders should be looking to him. What are the characteristics of Jesus? Jesus is love. Okay, so I must seek to develop love. Jesus was humble. Okay, I must seek to develop humility. Jesus was patient. Okay, I must seek to develop patience. As all of us look to Jesus for these characteristics. So as we choose leaders among us, because in the way that we function, we will be asking you to choose church leaders. You'll be wanting to look for people who are trying to imitate Jesus. And you won't find anybody who imitates Jesus perfectly. Not me, not anybody else. But you want people whose heart is going in that direction, that's their longing to be like Jesus. Okay, so that's the first answer to my question. Who is the pastor of our church? Jesus is the pastor of our church. Second answer. Are you ready for this one? Your eyes are open, your ears are open. You are the pastor of this church. Me? Yes, you. I'm talking to you. The Bible is talking to you. In the New Testament, the second half of our Bible, there is a phrase that comes back 60 times, repeated 60 times, and it is the phrase, one another. It's talking about reciprocity. One that comes back very often is love one another. You know that one. Another one is forgive one another. You've heard that. Another one is put up with one another. That's an important one also. But one that comes back often is encourage one another, care for one another, teach one another, admonish one another. I'll show you a few of these now. Hebrews chapter 10, this book in the Bible. Let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, but encouraging one another. So it doesn't say pastors encourage your church, it says encourage one another. Here's another text from the book of Hebrews. See to it, brothers and sisters, that none of you has a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God, but encourage one another daily, as long as it's called today, so that no one of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. We are often deceived by sin. Sin is very deceitful. And I need my brothers and sisters to encourage me and sometimes to exhort me, admonish me, tell me, Brad, are you on a bad path? We can do this for one another. Here is another example of this in the book of Colossians, written by the Apostle Paul. He says, let the message of Christ, or the word of Christ, dwell among you richly as you teach and admonish one another with all wisdom. That is, it doesn't say that just the pastor should be teaching and admonishing you, but one another. So what the Bible is showing us as a model for a church is not the model that you see on the top. It's not the pastor looking after all the members, teaching all the members, deciding everything, doing everything, but it's more like the model you see underneath, with many relationships between different members, and as we will see, a group of church leaders that we will call elders or pastors, who are equipping the members to look after one another. So that's what I believe I'm doing this morning, is equipping you to encourage one another as Christians. And this is much more dynamic than the first model, isn't it? Because one person or a group of people can never look after everybody's needs, but we can encourage one another. Yesterday I was with a group of people from the church, and one of the sisters was saying, I have one sister in the church, we see one another almost every day, and we encourage one another almost every day, and my spiritual life has changed since I've been doing that. There are 4 ways that the teaching should happen in a local church and the pastoral care. One is like what I'm doing this morning. A qualified leader preaches to the whole congregation on the Sunday morning. Another way is through our house groups. We have small groups that meet during the week. We have a group in Chinese, we have a group in Korean, we have a group in English, and we have a group in French. And these are very important groups. If you're not in a group yet, come and talk with me after, and I'll encourage you to show you how you can be part of a house group. So in the house groups, there is often a house group leader that does some teaching or leads the group in studying of a Bible text. Another way that teaching takes place is when maybe a Christian who is starting to get to know the Bible a little bit is going to help a new Christian or a seeking person to know how to read the Bible, and just one-on-one, they will read the Bible together. That's a teaching situation. And the last one is very informal. It's all believers who encourage one another by reminding each other of helpful truths from the Bible. Just, when we're having coffee after the service, or by phone or a text message, somebody's a little discouraged, maybe somebody's grieving, we send a little verse from the Bible just to remind them of God's love and care for them. So if we are a church that functions like that, then our spiritual needs will be better covered than if just one person is looking after all of them. Okay, so the question is, who is the pastor of our church? First answer, Jesus is the pastor of our church. Second answer, you are the pastor of your church. Third answer, the Bible talks about a team of leaders for the church, more than just one leader. In fact, when you read through the Bible, you will never find the term pastor or elder or overseer or shepherd, as we will see. You will never find it in the singular form. It will always be plural. So we don't talk about a shepherd of the church, but shepherds. We don't talk about an elder, but elders. We don't talk about an overseer, but overseers, and so forth. Let me show you this. when Paul is writing to the church in Philippi, he says this: to all God's holy people in Christ Jesus at Philippi, together with the overseers, S, and the deacons, S. So last week we had some teaching about deacons. Deacons are assistants for the pastoral leaders, which we can call overseers or elders. But as you see here, in this one church, in this one city, there were a group of overseers. Or, when you study the book of Acts, Acts is very interesting. It's the history of the very early church. And we see a model of how Paul and Barnabas went about starting churches in different cities and what they did. So they arrived in a city, they taught the good news of Jesus that we call the gospel. People started to believe, and then they would gather together for mutual encouragement. It became a church. And then Paul and Barnabas appointed elders with an S for them in each church. It doesn't say Paul and Barnabas appointed the pastor of the church. And then Paul is writing to Titus, who was a young pastor, and he sent him to the island of Crete. He says, the reason I left you in Crete was that you might put in order what was left unfinished and appoint elders, S, in every town as I directed you. Plural. And then when Paul was traveling, he wanted to meet the leaders of the church of Ephesus. It says, from my leaders, Paul sent to Ephesus for the elders of the church. This was a group of people. And the text we read in Peter, 1 Peter, to the elders among you, be shepherds, S, of God's flock. So you've noticed that where the Bible uses several words to talk about these people, at least 3 or 4. So in Acts 14:23, we have the word elders, which indicates that these people must have some spiritual maturity. It doesn't necessarily mean age, but somebody who's been walking with Christ for a significant number of years and who knows Christ and the Bible. Another word that is used is overseers. So this indicates that these people have some responsibility for the church. To oversee means to watch over with care. They have responsibility to lead, keep the church. And then another term which is used is shepherds or pastors, which can indicate the spiritual care and teaching of the church. Why do you think the Bible gives us this model of having a team of shepherds for a church? I have several answers to that question. To encourage one another within the team. As I mentioned, I've been a church planter, so often I've started churches and I was the only elder, as I have been in this church. Sometimes it can be a bit discouraging. But one time in a young church where we had named a few elders to be together, and the situation got very discouraging. Some people moved away, some people got mad and left the church. The church became very small, and I said to the other elders, maybe we should just stop this project and join a bigger church. And one of the other elders said, Brad, that would be doing just exactly what Satan wants us to do. And that one sentence that this brother told me, it just gave me new courage, and we pressed on, and the church grew. I think it's good to have a team of spiritual leaders also because in French we talk about atome crochu. That means you feel comfortable with one person more than with someone else, just for whatever reason, some kind of chemistry, or you can identify with that person, not so much with that person. So if there is a team of church leaders, you can identify more easily with one or the other of those people. And it gives different kinds of examples of spiritual life. Like today we have a board on the church. We have Nathaniel, we have Ban, we have Victor, Mark. We're all different. We all love the Lord, but you can see that our spirituality can be a little bit different. to avoid heavy stress and burnout. If one person has to do all the pastoral care, it can be dangerous for his health. To avoid abuse of power. Did you learn this sentence at school when you were studying politics, maybe? It says, all power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. It was Lord Acton, a British analyst who did this, said this over 100 years ago. But it's very true. If we have one person who's in power and there's nobody who is his equal, nobody who can say to him, was that a very good decision? Well, it can be dangerous for that person and for that group. So to avoid spiritual abuse. And just to make wiser decisions. A group can make a decision which is more wise and will be more respected. So we've had 3 answers to our question so far. Who is the pastor of the church? Jesus is the pastor of our church. You are the pastors of our church. We need a team of pastors for our church. One more point. Within that team of pastors, one can have a more particular role. So I've said a pastor within the elder group with a particular calling for teaching and leadership. We can see this in when Paul wrote to Timothy. Again, Paul was instructing Timothy on how to structure this new church, which was in Ephesus. And he says this, the elders who direct the affairs of the church well are worthy of double honor, especially those whose work is preaching and teaching. So let me show you another little diagram. What the Bible would like for us and what can be good is that on a team of elders or shepherds, maybe one has a particular calling and training for teaching the Bible and for giving leadership to that team. And it doesn't mean that that person is above that team. He's not the boss of the team. He's not the team manager. But he has a particular role to encourage that team, to stimulate that team. And this person was going to be doing more teaching in the church. So preparing teaching takes quite a lot of time. Like a message like this maybe takes 15 hours of preparation during the week to teach the Bible. And so a young pastor sometimes it takes 20 hours to prepare his teaching just on a Sunday morning. And an old pastor like me, maybe less time, maybe 10 hours, something like that. But that person needs time to study the Bible, to read good books, to attend a conference, to represent the church to other institutions, broader circles. It just takes time to visit people. And so I think that Paul is suggesting here that the church free one of the elders from his secular employment, from his professional job, in order to consecrate time particularly to the church. So we've come to call that person the pastor, but we don't have to. We can just call him an elder, shepherd, overseer. And he's not above the other elders, but a part of the team. Now, as I said, we have a team of leaders so far in our church. We haven't been calling them elders yet. But as you know, Catherine and I are retiring from church leadership within about a year and a few months, and not this summer, but the summer after. And so the other leaders on the board have invited Victor to take this role as pastor of the church. But we want to make that decision all together. So on June the 6th, which is a Sunday, we will have a meal together after the service. And then for those who are church members, we will ask them to vote on this so that it's a decision that we all take together. So if we do free someone from his secular employment to do this, then we need to help to support that person, right? It's just logic, but it's also a teaching from the Bible. We just read that elders who direct the affairs of the church well are worthy of double honor, especially those whose work is preaching and teaching. If you read the context, chapter 5 in Timothy, he's talking about supporting different people in the church, widows and others. And so here he's suggesting support for a pastor. First, Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, the Lord has commanded that those who preach the gospel should receive their living from the gospel. So this, it's not even Paul saying it, he's quoting Jesus, who said this. And then Paul says again in Galatians, the one who receives instruction in the word should share all good things with their instructor. He's talking about supporting pastors. So we are still a young church, and it's difficult for us as a small congregation to pay a full salary for someone. But our church has committed to covering 30% of Victor's salary for next year. And so we put it in our budget. When we had a general meeting in February, we voted on that. And progressively, as our church grows in maturity, generosity, and numbers, we want to take over more and more of his salary. So in the meantime, other Christians from other churches, that are maybe bigger churches, more mature churches, and Christians, will be helping to support Victor. So that shows that we're still in our growing process. If you have questions about all this, do come up and ask me at the end. So in the next week or two, I'll be handling other questions like, what do good shepherds do? I'll just show you now, and I'll talk about this at a later time. They lead the sheep, they provide food for the sheep, they protect the sheep, they care for suffering sheep, and they bring back wandering sheep. Those are all spiritual activities that our elders will have to be doing. But we'll talk more in the future about those roles and about the qualifications necessary for elders. I don't want to stop talking this morning without coming back to Jesus as the Good Shepherd, because he is the one we want to be looking to. There's a beautiful chapter in the Bible, the 10th chapter, the Gospel of John, and Jesus compares himself to the shepherd. He says things like this: I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep. My sheep know me. My sheep listen to my voice. I know them. They follow me. The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. There's good teaching in here about what our relationship to Jesus can be. First of all, we can recognize him as our shepherd. That's a conscious decision that we have to make at one point. We have to say, I need a shepherd. That's the first step. I need a shepherd. Who will be my shepherd? Jesus will be my shepherd. Jesus knows his sheep. He knows us intimately. He knows our secret thoughts. He knows the hurts in our heart from our childhood, from our adult life. He knows them and he cares about them. And my sheep know me. So if we say Jesus is my shepherd, we want to get to know him. So we will be reading the gospel in order to get to know Jesus better. My sheep listen to my voice. So as we read the Bible, as we come to worship here on a Sunday, we're listening to God's voice. We're opening our heart, our spiritual ears, to hear God's voice for our life. And a sheep follows his shepherd. So Jesus is leading. He's showing us a way, a good way to live. And we want to follow him. And here he warns us that there is an anti-shepherd, a bad shepherd, that would like to lead us in a different way. The Bible talks about Satan. Satan is a spiritual entity who is the enemy of our soul. What does he want? He wants to steal, to kill, and to destroy. But Jesus has come that we may have life and have it to the full. If I become one of Jesus' sheep, if I become a believer in Jesus Christ, he is going to give me a life that is full, a life that is abundant. It's not a boring life. It's an exciting life where we find out God's purpose for our life and find out Jesus' way of living. Last point. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. Remember I told you to imagine that you were the owner of sheep. Okay, you fired the shepherd. He was a bad shepherd. You say, I'm going to look after my sheep because I love my sheep. So you're out there in the field looking after the sheep, and along comes a big pack of wolves that want to eat your sheep. What do? Do you run away? Or do you stand up and fight? This is what Jesus did for us. On the cross, he's standing between the wolf and the sheep, saying, I have come to protect the sheep. I have come to give my life for the sheep. I've come to give it so that you can have a full life. And I'm ready to pay with my life to do that. And on the cross, Jesus is protecting us from the wolf. And he's leading us into his family, into reconciliation with God and God's family. So when we believe in Christ, this is what is happening in us. He's becoming our shepherd. We become his sheep, and we become a member of the church, his flock.